Hello and welcome to today's video. Today, my goal is to take a subject that many people who are learning the piano dread and explain it in a way that will not only be informative, but also enjoyable to watch. Yes, today we are learning about scales and keys, so buckle up, have your fingers loose, your piano keys shiny and in front of you, and your attitude excited to learn. By the way, this is episode number 2 in this series, How to Play Piano for Beginners, so if you haven't seen the first one, check that out, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see the next ones as soon as they come out. Okay, here we go. Now before we get into the really juicy stuff of this lesson, there are 2 terms that we have to define. First is a scale, which simply put is just a collection of notes. I'll show you an example of that in just a second. Next, a key tells what scale a song is based around. Or you could say what collection of notes will sound good in a song. Alright, let's take a look at a scale. If you have never heard this before, this is known as the C major scale. It is the most basic piano scale because it only uses the white keys. But the question is, why does it work? Why does it sound pleasing to your ear? And why does it sound incomplete and maybe even bother you if I stop before finishing? Why does it sound not so pleasing if you start on a different key, like say E? What if we start on an A? Why does that sound so much sadder than when we started on a C? What is so special about these notes that we're playing, and also what note we're starting on? We will answer all these questions and more in today's video, but first, let's go back to C major. Let's break down its name, C major. We have a note, C, and a word, major. Let's start with the note C. So the first part of a scale name defines what note the scale starts on. For instance, C major starts on the note C. This note is called the tonic, or the first scale degree. It acts sort of like the home base of the scale. A scale, or even a song, is always trying to get back to home base, just like the base runners in baseball. That's why when you hear this, you want to hear it resolve or get back to the tonic. Ah. Just like in a scale, the melody of a song, or the part that you might sing along to, wants to get back to the tonic. The melody feels most comfortable when it reaches its tonic, the home base. So hypothetically, you could have a song where the melody is just one note repeated over and over, the tonic, but that would be pretty boring. Unless, of course, you're the rock group The Killers and you write the insanely popular song, Mr. Brightside. Take a listen to the verse of that song. Now pretend for a second that you're not actually a member of The Killers, and you want to write a song that uses a second note, maybe even a third, or more. Like I said last week, even though there's 12 notes, most songs only use 7. So how do you know which notes are gonna sound good? Let's visualize this. Close your eyes, go on, close them, and imagine you're exploring the woods, and you stumble upon an old, run-down, abandoned house. Your voice in your head says, "Oh no, don't go in, don't do it." But you reject common sense and go in anyways. You enter, and in front of you there's a grand staircase, but clearly it's gonna collapse soon. All the wood is rotted. Doesn't look good. You know it will lead to more adventures, but if you put your weight on the wrong steps, the whole thing could collapse and you could hurt yourself. What you need is a guide, or maybe a sequence of steps that you can follow. Now, open your eyes. We're back in the world of music. So this is essentially what a scale does. It tells you which notes are safe to use, which stairs are safe to step on, and what notes you shouldn't use in your song, or what stairs to skip. Does that make sense? I hope so. Now, say you've never been to this abandoned house before, but your friend has, and they tell you exactly where to skip a step and where to not skip a step so that you can get around safely. This is basically what the second part of a scale name does, the major in C major. It defines a sequence of half steps and whole steps that you can follow so that you know exactly what notes to play no matter what note you start on. The 2 most common types of scales are the major scale and the minor scale. They each have a unique sequence of steps. But before we can talk about these sequences, we have to talk about the steps. Okay, let's talk about steps. When you go up the piano chromatically, or using every single note, we say that the distance between these notes is a half step, or a semitone. It does not matter if we are going from a black key to a white key, a white key to a black key, or even a white key to a white key with no black key in between, like E and F. The distance between all of these is the same, a half step. 2 half steps make up, you guessed it, a whole step, or a tone. So anytime that we are skipping a note, we say that these notes are a whole step apart. C and D are a whole step apart because they have C sharp in between. E and F sharp are a whole step apart because they have F in between. C sharp and D sharp are a whole step apart. One other note, don't confuse this musical distance that we're talking about with the actual spacing of your keys on the keyboard. For instance, when we look at C and D, they're a whole step apart, but E and F are only a half step apart, even though on the keyboard it looks like they're the same distance apart. The difference is that E and F don't have a black key in between them, so they are only a half step apart. Let's start with a major scale. The easiest major scale to learn is C major, which we showed at the start of this video. It's the easiest because it only uses the white notes. Let's look at the sequence of half steps and steps that we take in order to play this scale. When we go from C to D, you can see we're skipping C sharp, so it's going to be a whole step. When we go from D to E, it's also a whole step. E to F, there's no black key, so it's a half step. F to G is a whole step. G to A, whole step. A to B, whole step. And B to C again, it's just a half step since there's no black key. So again, the sequence that we use for a major scale is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. This sequence is true for any major scale. Let's try starting on a E. If we want to play an E major scale, we just have to follow the same sequence that we used when playing the C major scale. So we'll start on E, that's the tonic of our scale. Now start with a whole step, so we'll skip the F and play F sharp, another whole step, skip the G and play G sharp, then comes a half step to A whole step, we'll skip the A sharp and play the B, then another whole step, skip the C, go to C sharp, whole step to D sharp, and finally a half step to E. All together. As you can see, this E major scale sounds very similar to the C major scale. The only thing that changes is the starting position, but the quality of the scale remains the same. Let's try one more example. Let's start on a B flat. If we want to start on a B flat, we'll go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And that's how you can play a B flat scale. If you're comfortable, try this for yourself now. Pause the video and pick any random note and try to follow this sequence to play the major scale that starts on that note. There are 12 major scales and 12 minor scales, since there are 12 notes on the keyboard. While it might take some time to remember the sequence to play a major scale, with some practice, they will all become second nature to you, and you won't even have to think about the half steps and whole steps. You'll just be able to think about the notes that are in the scale. You'll just think, oh, D, I can remember what notes are in this scale, without even having to think about the steps. Okay, let's talk about keys now. So like I said before, the key of a song tells what scale the song is based around. By the way, this key is completely unrelated to a piano key, like we've been using. Very different things. For instance, if a song takes all of its notes from the C major scale, we would say that that song is in the key of C. Quick sidebar, oftentimes when referring to the name of a key, we omit the word major. So instead of saying, we're playing this song in the key of C major, you can just say, this song is in the key of C. However, you can't do this for a minor key. If a song takes its notes from the C minor scale, you have to say that this song is in the key of C minor. If you just say C, you're referring to C major. So speaking of minors, no, not that kind of minor. This is a music channel. Come on. All right, now let's look at a minor scale. The easiest minor scale to learn is the A minor scale.
As you can see, this minor scale uses only white notes, just like the C major scale. Since the A minor scale uses all the same notes as the C major scale, we say that this is a relative minor of the C major scale. It has all the same notes, but starts on a different pitch. Now let's talk about the sequence of half steps and steps that you will take to play a minor scale. Let's look at A minor again. From A to B, it's a whole step since we're skipping the A sharp. B to C is a half step. C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F, half step. F to G is a whole step. And G to A is a whole step. Altogether, that sequence is whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. Let's try that sequence on a different minor scale. How about D minor? When we look at this, starting on D, whole, half, whole, whole, half to the B flat, whole, whole. So yeah, take some time practicing your minor scales as well. Just like with the major scales, you can pick a note and try to follow the exact sequence of steps that we used to play the minor scale.
Real briefly, we have to talk about the other method to understanding scales, although I feel like this method is harder for beginners. But you will appreciate it more as you learn the scales. Instead of memorizing a sequence of half steps and whole steps, you can just memorize how many sharps or how many flats a key or a scale has. For instance, if you're in the key of F, you would remember that there's just one flat, B flat. If you're in the key of D, you'd remember that there's two sharps. If you've heard of the circle of fifths before, this is one place where that can become really useful. As you go around the circle, each new key has one more sharp. There's a lot more to dive into with the circle of fifths, but we don't have time for that today. But if that helps you understand scales, just know that that's out there. So I wanted to talk about how to practice these scales, but I felt that I was squeezing too much into this video, so I'll be making a whole entire video dedicated just to that subject that'll be coming out soon. I will put a link to that on screen once that video is up. So I hope you learned something in this video. If so, leave a thumbs up down below. Scales may be confusing and even frustrating at times, but understanding them is super important no matter what kind of music you are playing. Try to think of a scale as your friend. Instead of having to choose from all 12 notes when playing a song, a scale brings it down to only 7. Aw, what a good friend. Learning scales also improves your ability to learn songs quickly, so by learning them, you're saving lots of time in the long run. That'll do it for today. If you're new, try watching one of my original songs, and thanks again for watching. Have a great day.